It is 6:30. Oh. I don't know why that was echoing. My apologies. I hadn't turned it on, or at least I hadn't thought. So I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. And we'll move forward. And this is a special council meeting, and just a note of thanks to all the staff members here today in August. August is usually the month that we sort of have off to regroup, and a number of people are on holidays, but some even come in off their holidays to join us even so. And we appreciate that. So thank you to the staff for being available for this important meeting. Number 2 on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. And I have a motion from Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Foti, that the agenda be adopted as circulated. Are we good with the adoption as presented? Go ahead. Oh, sorry. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried. Just got ahead of me there, Councillor Maybe. Number 3, declaration of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof. Are there any interests to declare? I see no hands. So we'll move forward with number 4, which is delegations, presentations, Republic, Urbanism, Community Improvement Plan, background report. So I'm assuming they're online. Okay, there we go, Jesse. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead.
Well, good evening, Mayor and members of council and staff, and anybody watching from home on the live stream. I certainly it is partly my fault that I guess you guys are in here on an August evening, so I'll try and keep it. I'll try and keep it brief, but I think we do have a little bit of an exciting update for you tonight, just with respect to the CIP that we've been working on. So I've got a brief presentation to just kind of update council, and then present some of the draft recommendations that we're going to be looking at over the next month as we draft the plan. So I'm just going to share my screen really quick here, and maybe if I could just get a thumbs up if you guys can see that. Okay.
Good.
Okay. Perfect. So maybe I'll just start with a brief introduction. So my name is Jesse McPhail. I'm a urban planner with Republic Urbanism. So we're a kind of community planning, design, and consultation firm based out of Montreal. And we've been working with our partners, Parcel Economics. And so they're land economists who kind of work in the same realm as us, but they deal with a lot more of the land economy side, economic development, and number crunching around feasibility and budgets and sort of that. So we've been tasked with developing a community improvement plan for the township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands. And so I'm here tonight again to kind of give council an update on that and kind of show you where we're at in that process. So in terms of the agenda for tonight, I'm just going to give a brief project overview, sort of what a CIP is and kind of where we're at. I'm going to quickly review the background report and kind of consultation efforts that have been undertaken to date. It's my understanding that council did receive a brief summary report as well as a copy of the background report. So I probably won't be diving into the weeds on that because it is quite a lengthy document, but there is some good nuggets of information in there that I will touch on. And then kind of the third, and I would say probably most interesting to council likely tonight will be kind of the draft recommendations that we're looking at. And I will kind of preface that by saying that while they are recommendations at this time, we are still kind of workshopping them as a project team and with township staff. And so it's likely that we're going to be bringing sort of a full-on draft plan to council and members of the public in October, so this fall. And then I'll just go over some of the next steps and kind of what to expect as the project keeps rolling on. So in terms of project overview, so again, I believe council probably has, most members of council has a firm grasp on what a community improvement plan is. So I'll kind of keep this brief, but a community improvement plan is a planning and economic development tool used to help guide investment, development and revitalization projects within the community. And these are a lot of times focused on physical improvements to the community. So these plans are authorized under Section 28 of the Planning Act, and this allows an exception to kind of the bonusing prohibitions under the Municipal Act that would allow council to invest in more private ventures and help property owners with improving their buildings and sites. So a CIP kind of supports physical improvements in the community by kind of laying out a vision and goals for improvement. And to kind of tackle that vision and goals, it uses a combination of financial incentives and municipal or public plans and strategies for kind of the public sector. So I have a brief graphic here that just kind of shows the interplay between the public sector and the private sector. So under a CIP, the public sector, which in this case would be the township or any other public agencies, they could work together on different projects for improving the public realm. So this could include, streetscaping improvements, improving existing parks or water access. And then on the private sector side, on the left of the screen, you'll see that private sector components can include improvements to buildings, so facade improvement, signage improvement, accessibility improvements to kind of private properties. And together, these projects and initiatives will work together towards sort of community priorities that could be, for example, focused on accessibility, housing, or building revitalization. So again, you're working together between the private sector and the public sector to kind of achieve the vision and goals that you've set out for your community improvement plan. So in terms of the township CIP, this will be the first formal CIP for the township, and we'll kind of build on the existing grant programming and policies that the township does offer to date. So there are currently 4 different programs that the township currently offers that are very much in the realm of community improvement, albeit they are authorized under different sections of the Ontario Heritage Act, the Municipal Act, the Planning Act. So what we're going to be looking at doing is kind of building on the success and the process that's been undertaken to date with those and kind of bring them under one roof. So this CIP will sort of at a baseline seek to encourage improvements throughout the township rather than kind of specific areas. But with that being said, it will address specific priorities in specific areas. And lastly, for the township CIP, it was noted at the outset of the project that the township is very much interested in involving the community and engaging the community throughout the process. So that is a very important part in making sure that we're appropriately scoping the plan and identifying priorities that resonate with the people who live, work, and play here. So in terms of roadmap and kind of project status, as you can see on the timeline that's up on the screen now, we're about halfway through the project. So to date, we've gone through our first kind of bout of public consultation, as well as the preparation of the background report. And then, so tonight we're kind of looking at the culmination of those findings through those 2 different tasks. And then kind of for the second half of the project, as we move into the fall, we're going to be really getting into the weeds and drafting the actual plan. So looking at the programming, looking at the incentives, looking at the initiatives, and kind of the structure of that document. And then when we get to around October, that's when we're going to have an actual working kind of draft copy of the plan that we'll be very excited to present to council and members of the public. So it won't be the only time that council members of the public will get a chance to take a look at that draft plan. There will be a formal or statutory public meeting in November that we're looking at planning, and then anticipating a council review and adoption sometime in early December. So in terms of the background report and consultation, like I said, I will give a brief summary. Council does have a copy of the background report. It is a lengthy document, so I'll try and keep this rather short. But in terms of the background report itself, this is a really crucial document to help not only kind of the project team understand the current conditions, the needs, and the priorities in the community, but it's also a chance for township staff and members of the community to really get involved in helping us understand those needs and gaps. So the document that was prepared included some main components like a policy review and legislation review, an economic and market analysis, consultation summary, and then the culmination of that work looked at pulling some emerging themes and kind of preliminary recommendations that were based on the findings of that report. And what's great about this report too is it's not kind of just a standalone CIP specific background report. This is a document that would hold some value outside of this project. So there's a lot of great information in there in terms of land use analysis, especially market analysis. Our friends at Parcel did a great kind commercial land stock and employment land stock analysis as part of that. So that's something that could maybe help complement some other projects, the township may be undertaking in the future. Ultimately, though, this background report provides more direction for the development of the CIP, helps us identify, the vision, the goals, and the kind of contents of that plan to make sure that it's scoped in on what it needs to be scoped in on. In terms of the consultation, as I said, this was a process that was carried out concurrently with the preparation of the background report. So again, a very crucial role of preparing a successful community improvement plan. So to date, the project team has met with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, as well as county staff to review process. There was a public survey and open house that were undertaken across May and June. There was a stakeholder roundtable workshop held in early July. And there's been a more passive engagement strategy with the township's website. So we have been coordinating with staff and posting copies of documents on that site to make sure that we're keeping the public up to date. So I will say to date, we have had the engagement level with that first round of consultation for that first month. We saw around 230 people engage with the project, which is, we were pretty happy with that number for the amount of time. So a lot of people seem to be pretty excited and interested in this project. So we're going to hope to capitalize that as we move into the fall and make sure that we're really engaging and kind of feeding back to those folks who are interested. So still to come in the fall, we will again be posting the draft plan for public comment. We will be hosting the statutory public meeting, and there will be a council review and decision. So it's certainly not the first and only time that the public has had a chance to participate. There will be a handful of other times coming up next. So in terms of the culmination of the background report and the consultation that was carried out, the main kind of conclusions from that report involved emerging themes and priorities. So I have them up on the screen. I won't dig too much into them right now, but these really just kind of help us on the project team side see kind of where the priorities are for the community. So one of the main was consolidating existing community improvement initiatives. So looking at the grant programming and seeing how we can introduce that to the new plan. We understand that heritage conservation and celebration is a very important part of the township. Collaboration and coordination, leveraging your main streets as sort of the backbones of your communities. So there were a handful of these that were identified, and these really helped us feed into developing the draft recommendations that you'll see tonight, and make sure that they are scoped to your community, they're context specific, and they will address the priorities that were identified. So with that said, with the draft recommendations, again, I will note that the following items are still very much works in progress, but they are at a point where we are comfortable presenting these to council as an update to kind of give you an idea and a flavor of where the plan's headed, and to maybe spur some interest in terms of comments or questions that may arise tonight with respect to some of the draft recommendations being put forward. The project team will be working with staff over the next kind of month or so to hone these and to really draft these up into a more formal document, so that when council does see this in the fall, there will be a lot more substance to comment on and to sink your teeth into. And I will note finally that some of the content may change or be removed as the draft is developed. So in terms of the general recommendations for the plan, we have two kind of key things that we want to focus on as we draft this document. So the first, we did hear that through the consultation and through the background report, we feel that it is crucial that the township designate the entirety of the municipality as a community improvement project area. So a community improvement project area is the area to which a CIP can apply. And so official plans will set out policies with respect to identifying community improvement project areas. And currently, the township's official plan identifies the settlement areas of Lansdowne, Lyndhurst, Sealy's Bay, and the Rockport area. But we feel that there are some opportunities outside of these areas, and we want to make sure that the council's not handcuffed to these specific areas in the new CIP. So one of the first recommendations would be that the entirety of the township is identified under the plan so that you have as much flexibility as possible over the next 10 years as this is implemented. And the second, which I kind of touched on already, is absorbing the existing township grant programs into the new CIP. So bringing everything under one umbrella, making it easier for administrative purposes, for budgeting purposes, for implementation purposes. It just helps to streamline things and kind of bring everything under one roof to help implement and kind of focus improvement efforts in the community. So with that said, some more of the fun stuff. So we do have kind of a draft vision that we've workshopped. And so really at a high level, a CIP does need a vision for what we're trying to achieve and where we're trying to go with community improvement projects. And so really this sits kind of at the top of the pyramid of the CIP. So I'll quickly kind of read this. So the vision that we've identified is through a combination of financial incentives and community improvement initiatives, the township will support the revitalization and enhancement of its unique and historic communities to foster conditions that encourage economic growth, beautify our core areas, build civic pride, and support a high quality of life across Leeds and the Thousand Islands. So as part of achieving that vision now, we need to identify some more tangible goals that we can work towards and measure throughout the plan's implementation. So we identified 10, I believe it's 10 goals that through the implementation of this plan we'll be working to achieve. So the first would be enhancing the vitality of the township's main streets. The second would be increasing the number of designated heritage buildings and sites and support conservation efforts. Cultivating, inviting public spaces that are accessible to everyone. Promoting community and pride and responsibility in respect to property maintenance and care. Establishing cooperative partnerships to realize the township's vision for community improvement. Facilitating the development of more affordable and attainable housing options in the township. Ensuring the fair allocation of improvement efforts, funding, and resources across all communities. Using physical improvements to further build the township's identity and branding. Encouraging the establishment and growth of businesses, including those in the agritourism sector. And last but not least, creating opportunities to educate, involve, and support the community with initiatives focused on natural heritage resources and ecosystems. So again, these goals will be identified. We'll be looking at identifying in the plan more tangible achievements to work towards. So these will help as the plan is implemented, let's say for applications for incentives or for project funding. You could review those against the goals of the plan and measure as that's being implemented. So these really help to keep us on track as that plan is implemented. So in terms of the kind of meat and the potatoes now, the first side of a CIP again is with kind of rests with financial incentive programs, and the second side of it rests with municipal leadership initiatives. So I'll just go through the recommended financial incentives right now that we're looking at. So the first would be a Main Street facade improvement program. So this type of program would look at improvements and supporting improvements to generally non-residential buildings along main streets and key corridors to help businesses and other non-residential uses sort of beautify their buildings and really add some more life to buildings, just to help with that streetscape character. The second would be a site improvement program. So where a Main Street facade improvement program is focused on the building and the kind of the face of the building, a site improvement would look at areas kind of like parking areas, hardscaping, more permanent landscaping, tree plantings, site lighting, things that would beautify a site rather than the building. The third would be an accessibility and code compliance program. So this program would focus on helping with improvements to buildings, installing wheelchair ramps, retrofitting washrooms, conducting other barrier-free improvements to buildings to help them meet their AODA requirements. The fourth would be an additional residential unit program. So as we know, with a lot of the housing challenges going on right now, folks are looking to get any support they can with respect to the creation of more affordable and attainable housing. So with the additional residential unit program, this would look at supporting either the establishment of new additional dwelling units, or the legalization of existing ones that may not be up to code or may have gone kind of under the radar, and looking to kind of bring those up to code, make them safe for their inhabitants. The fifth would be a building conversion and expansion program. So this would be looking at interior conversions or redesignations of sites and helping with businesses get established, as well as helping with expansions. So if there's an existing business that needs to grow and they need to do some work to a building or change some things on their site to help them grow or add to their business, this type of program would help them with some of that work. The sixth would be an agritourism program. So this would look at funding and supporting ventures around agritourism and more on-farm diversified uses out in the rural area. And lastly would be an environmental stewardship program. So this would look at, this would likely focus on nonprofits or agencies that are looking to undertake studies or other projects associated with the preservation, conservation, or enhancement of lakes and other natural heritage ecosystems in the community. The township is populated with a lot of rivers and lakes and natural areas. So this was one that did come up as being quite important. So in terms of the recommended financial incentives, a lot of these or most of these would likely be based on a matching grant basis. So typically you would have a certain maximum funding amount, and then the township could match up to 50% of project costs that are associated with eligible improvements under these programs. So in terms of the actual numbers themselves at this time, we don't have an idea at this time what those numbers are looking like. That's what we're going to be working on over the coming weeks, is to look at feasibility, budget implications, and just what's realistic for the township to tackle in terms of funding these types of incentive programs. And so that's what we're going to be sitting down with our friends at Parcel as well as township staff to kind of hash that out. So on the other side, we have the recommended municipal initiatives. So these initiatives are intended to complement the financial incentive programs and grants that will be contained in the CIP. And these will allow the township to maintain more of a structured catalog of improvement projects that could be budgeted for over the lifespan of the plan. So the lifespan of a CIP, if I didn't mention it before, is 10 years typically. So it is a list of items, but it shouldn't be interpreted as a to-do list. The initiatives don't necessarily form a firm commitment of council to undertake their implementation. It's more so a source of inspiration and structure for if the township does have budget allocated to these projects or is looking to apply for grants in the future. You guys have an action plan in place that you can direct that money towards. So again, throughout the draft planning process, we will be looking for feedback on these municipal initiatives. So the first would be a Main Street revitalization in the public realm. So this would be sort of publicly focused improvements to your main streets, your commercial core areas, just things to revitalize and improve the aesthetic. And we do understand that a lot of the main streets, if not most of them, I think in the urban settlement areas, they are under a county jurisdiction or sort of a shared jurisdiction. So this initiative will involve a lot of coordination and collaboration between the county, MTO, and the township. The second would be improvements to public parks and water access. So this here, just as an example, is at Haskins Point. This is one of the great spots in the community that we were able to visit when we were down. But the township does have a lot of great lake access parks and different parks and recreational opportunities. And we feel that it would be a great opportunity to put some monies through the CIP towards the improvement and introduction of additional amenities and improving these existing parks and water access points. The third item could be, for the financial incentives, we did talk about a environmental stewardship program that would look at funding ecosystem studies and grants and analyses. So if the township would rather develop this as a separate standalone program, we are having it here as sort of an option to undertake as a separate item. Number 4 is an unopened right-of-way opportunity assessment. So the township does have, as you can see on the map there, those are highlighted, all the unopened right-of-ways that exist in the township today. Off the top of my head, I forget what the amount of acreage is, but it's quite significant. And there are some potentially great opportunities for the township to look at, creating natural areas or linkages or linear parks, over the next 10 years, or even just undertaking a study to see, what could potentially be done with these unopened right-of-ways. They could remain, they could be disposed of and funding put onto other projects, but it's something that we feel the township should look at. So the township does have the Rockport Strategic and Transportation Master Plan. There are a number of recommendations within that that we feel is kind of an easy pull into the CIP. So the recommendation here would be just to undertake the implementation of those recommendations. 6 is adaptive reuse of township facilities and sites. So this is the Community and Fire Hall in Sealy's Bay, just as an example. This is just more of a high-level recommendation that the township kind of undertake feasibility assessments for, up-using and up-zoning or adaptive reuse of existing amenities and sites to accommodate new uses or community spaces. 7 would be a wayfinding strategy. So this would help to kind of give a little more structure with respect to wayfinding elements in the community. So mainly signage, mapping, and coordinating those between the different communities and features in the area. The township does have an existing catalog of some great wayfinding in certain areas, but just looking at improvements to that. Looking at property standards support programming. So we did hear this from the community and businesses that property standards was an item of interest. So this would look at, potentially looking at different programming in the community, like a community cleanup days or different programming to assist with the cleanup of different properties. The 9th one is the preparation of a township land acknowledgement and communications policy. This was identified at the stakeholder workshop that was held in July, and it's something that was identified as being of interest to the township moving forward. So that's one of the recommendations there. The 10th would be a Win the Space program to be considered. So this will be looking a little more closely at the vacant land base and the commercial spaces and non-residential spaces in the community to see what the feasibility of this is. But essentially what a Win this space is the township could potentially enter into a partnership with a landowner or a building owner and subsidize either part or all of the lease for a set term for a business that's starting up or looking to establish for 6 months or for a year to help someone kind of get started on their feet. And it really helps to fill a space if it is in fact vacant. And last but not least, would be working with the county to support attainable and affordable housing development. So largely this would likely rest on pursuing the development of a housing strategy or a housing study to look at the needs and really assess the gaps in the community for housing, particularly affordable housing and vacancies. That was something that we did hear from the community, is the lack of available housing. So again, it's a big list, but it's not necessarily a to-do list. It's more of a source of inspiration at this point. So with that said, I'll briefly go over the next steps and then I will open it to questions. So in terms of next steps, so over the next month, we're going to be drafting the CIP and looking at finalizing programming, digging a little more into budget, implementation, and feasibility. In October, we're hoping to bring the CIP to council and public for comment. And at the same time, we'll be looking at undertaking a minor official plan amendment to the township's official plan to allow us to designate the entire township as a community improvement project area. In November, we'll be looking at having the statutory public meeting for the draft CIP. So that'll be an opportunity for the project team as well as council to get more formal feedback on the draft plan. And finally, in December, we would hopefully be looking at a council decision. So again, just a little graphic to remind you, we're about halfway through the project. So with that said, I would thank everybody for listening to the presentation and for being here tonight. And we're really enjoying the project, and we're really excited to kind of dig our hands into actually drafting these programs out with staff. So with that, I would kind of open the floor to any comments or questions that members of council may have. And if I don't have an answer for you tonight, I can certainly follow up with Marnie and make sure we get you guys answers that you need. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Jesse. Does anybody have any questions or comments in regards to the presentation we've just heard? Go ahead, Councillor Fody, then Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Jesse. I guess the first thought I had on the background report is how comprehensive it was. There was very little, if any, aspects of the township that weren't covered in one way or another, which was great. I know you've gathered this through the aforementioned sources, but to see it all in a concise print form, it makes it great moving forward, even for those of us at this table, to as a point of reference, I guess what I'm saying. So thank you for where we are at this point. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councillor Maybe, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Mr. McFall. Again, a great report. I was very interested in a lot of it. I did have many questions, but which is not uncommon for me. So one of the questions was brownfield. You mentioned that, and I don't know how deep we are into brownfield, so it's another curiosity of what else we have that might be around that is going to rear up. On the Lyndhurst map, there's some commercial property that's no longer commercial. I noticed that. Settlement areas, I noticed, and in the OP, when it was brought forward way back when, Councillor Cataraqui can remember, Escott was not noted as a settlement area, and at one time it was in our community. So I'm just wondering why we don't include it as a settlement area and what the status would change it. And then to that point, we also have other areas that have fairly good population, and one being the Outlet and Willowbank, and why they might not be a settlement area, other than, you know, a settlement area has a perimeter or property that's concise, but are those areas possibly considered that in our future? Just throw it out there as a question, something to come back on as far as I'm concerned on that one. And I know I've talked about, because we talk about affordable housing all the time, no matter where we are, work or conversations and stuff, and how do we get affordable housing? And as Madam Mayor, you know, with the mortgage brokerage that you have, the housing costs are so high. It's when you look at affordable housing, you know, and I was just up to Whitby to my son's house, and the property up there is close to $1 million, every one of them. It doesn't take long to figure out that affordable housing and, you know, minimum wage don't coincide anymore. So what can we do to do that? Another point to that is that the homeless veterans village is being built on the site that I actually work on. They actually brought 4 of the units in today, and they're continuing that process because it's going to be up and running very shortly. But again, it's a different type of program for the homeless. And I've been a proponent, and I've seen this more in the States where my son lives, is that he's in a trailer park, but you'd swear it wasn't a trailer park. It looks like just like any other subdivision. The difference is that trailers are anywhere from 90,000 or 100,000 up to about 300,000. Now you do have the fees for the park, for the maintenance, water, sewer, and whatever else. But is that not more affordable than our $1 million homes? So I'm wondering whether us as a community should be looking at that as a potential next step. And I know we do have 2 of them out in the Sealy's Bay area. And they've been there established for a long period of time. And some of the residents have been there a long time. And yes, there's some upgrades that need to be done. But when it was first done, it was well done. A lot of people were there and it was well received in the community. So I'm wondering whether, as we get to affordable housing, whether we need to revisit that thought. And I'll leave that there. And the one thing that noted on the survey is that our population is around 9,800 and our sign on the highway says 92. So maybe it needs a change, just to throw that out. And other than that, it's a great report and I look forward to maybe having some responses to some of the questions that I posed. Thank you.
I have
Appreciate it.
First of all, I have a few comments, 6 pages, but I won't go on. But it's a process question. This is the opportunity to speak, and then we accept it as a report later in the meeting, Your Worship.
So the delegation were to ask questions of the presenter or for clarification or why something wasn't covered. So the questions that were just asked are fine. We're not here to debate anything back and forth. The motion that's going to come forward as far as accepting the report as information, there is another opportunity to ask further questions. But if you have any questions for the presenter, he won't be.
I don't have any specific questions because, I did spend the time with it, honestly. It is a strong report and there's a lot of useful things, but my sort of overall response to it is probably not about the value of the report or the effort of the consultants. It has more to do with what's our mindset going to be with respect to where we go from here with this. And that's where I wondered, does that discussion happen at this moment or does that discussion happen later in the meeting?
Thank you for that clarity. I would expect that that discussion happens when the motion is on the floor, because that's more specific about where our minds need to be going forward before we accept the report.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I'll save my 6 pages for that part of the meeting, but I do appreciate the quality of the work because it did inspire my 6 pages, among other things. They've done a very good job, so thank you.
Any further comments or questions for the presenter? Brock, do you have any comments or questions? Okay.
If Madam Mayor, if I could jump in and just to talk a little bit about the process and just kind of the next steps in the project. In the fall is when we will be presenting council with quite a bit more substance. I do understand it is quite high level at this point in terms of presenting the recommended financial incentives and the initiatives. But when we do develop the actual draft, council will have an opportunity to take a look at those programs that are being considered and providing more directed feedback, if you will, on kind of those directions that were kind of alluded to. So, where council wants to put their priorities or focus. So I will say that in a long way of saying it, council will have a lot more to kind of sink their teeth into come the fall with respect to the programming proposed. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Foti, another word then?
Thank you, Your Worship. Jesse, when you put up that screen with the unopened road allowances, I converted in my mind to dollars and cents. My question would be the director of planning. If the director of planning looked at unopened road allowances, is there any real money to be had, or does it depend on the road we're talking about? Like you have to get into a bidding war, I assume, before it gets into something of value. Is that true?
Through Your Worship, a lot of not a lot of municipalities, but I've seen situations where, as Jesse mentioned, there's a good road allowance that's a connector between two areas. There's no topographic constraints and it's a great walking trail, or there's opportunities for municipalities to make use of those. I know in some cases we have the ATV clubs using some of our unopened road allowances. Given our topography and our water, we've got a lot of interrupted road allowances. So there's some that would be an easy, there's not much we can do with those. So we do get a lot of inquiries into our road allowances, people wanting to acquire them to consolidate properties and different things. We have policies in the official plan that speak to not disposing of road allowances that lead to water to improve public access, which is one of the items that's mentioned in the background report. So unopened road allowances do provide opportunities, but that's where I think the recommended study would narrow down what are the important ones in terms of prioritizing where there are opportunities for recreational, passive recreational trails, multi-use and access to the water. So those are things that study would help give us more information about, so we could figure out where we want to actually focus our work.
Any further comments or questions? I see no hands up. We will thank our presenter and move along in our agenda. So thank you very much for the work done to date, and we look forward to the next report that's coming to council in the fall.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Okay, so number 5 on the agenda, staff reports, planning report SR-141-23, community improvement plan, background report. Motion comes forward from Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Foti, that council receive planning report SR-141-23, community improvement plan, background report as information. So the motion is now on the floor. Councillor Jameson, I'll identify your 6 pages and ask you to somehow
Summarize.
maybe.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, it's only 5 pages, so I counted them again. So I just reiterate, it is a strong report and it brings a lot to the table. I see an awful lot of a situation where the public is asked to sincerely respond to what they see as priorities for the township. We know as this council formation that we had to spend a great deal of time putting aside world pandemics, getting things in order. And it meant that a lot of the things that we would address with respect to public concern were not, because we just didn't have the resource. And when I say they were not addressed, they were not addressed over 3 or 4 decades prior to our arrival. So we learned that we have buildings that haven't been taken care of and parks that have been neglected, but they have been neglected for a long time. So in the course of one conversation I was part of, there was a lot of discussion about this high level opportunity in SIP. And it did default to, well, we've been looking for a plan for Rockport for 15 years. We don't think the parks in Sealy's Bay are properly mowed. I mean, it just defaults back to things that I used to sit in council chamber when I was a humble Sabara director and just hear. So it's not that you're looking at a staff or an existing council and saying you're not doing something. There just isn't the culture in place to get things done because we haven't been doing them. And the staff we have now is as strong a management team as we have probably ever had in this township since amalgamation. If there was ever a group of people to try to get the culture changed to the next stage, it's this group. So for me, this comes down to understanding that about 95%, and that's how I read our budget, about 95% of our budget is mandated or regulated, whether it's making sure the planning department works, the building works, the fire personnel show up. All of those things are mandated and regulated. And by my count on our budget, it's about 95% of the money. I can be corrected, but that other 5%, which includes the libraries, is certainly not sufficient to even begin to try to do some of these things that we'd all like to see done. So I can go through a very long list, but it really comes down to, is the council prepared? At no time is the public in this exercise, and I noticed in previous exercises like that thing they did, the strategic plan where we're going to have spas in Sealy's Bay and all kinds of stuff from, gosh, going back a decade. At no time did anybody say first, okay, what do you want to do and how much are you going to pay? Are you prepared to see your taxes go up? Well, of course, we don't want our taxes to go up, but we still want all these things. So if we are not going to, as a council, say, yeah, this is a good idea and the public wants it, and we are going to address what I consider to be rather a major deficit in the difference between the spit and polish approach to the parks, to the buildings, and all the things that we don't resource our staff to do. And they still manage to do a whole bunch of things anyway, and I'm not sure how they achieve it. So I think what I'm concerned about is that we go back into the marketplace with a bunch of recommendations that all look terrific. And then we pass this thing, and then we don't, as a council, say, we're going to have to raise the taxes, whatever, just we don't raise the taxes enough to stand still, let alone try to move this thing forward. So with all the good things we might want to do, and we'd have to cherry pick, because we're probably not going to be able to do affordable housing. It's just the reality of all the rules and regulations that we have to deal with. But are we prepared to see a percentage increase in the budget that does allow us to get some good things going with respect to the discretionary things? Because all those other things like good roads that are getting better all the time under the current management is great to see. The planning department, the just huge advances that have been made. I mean, across the fire service as well. I can just keep picking all the things that have gone well, but this is a deficit area. This whole idea of a community improvement plan needs money up front. It needs the investment up front. And I know that, and this is where I'm sorry to draw from previous life. If you don't put the money in, you're not going to get other money to come to you. And that's the whole issue of grants. People and outside agencies that might fund us are looking for a percentage. So if the community does not have enough resources to put money on the table, all of this may be one of those things where 3 years from now, our citizens say, well, why didn't you do any of that stuff? You passed this thing and then you didn't do it. I think we have to be very honest with our residents and say, these are all these wonderful things, and we have to cherry pick, as Jesse pointed out, but we can do things. We can do the spit and polish. We can do these things, but neighbor, we're all going to have to pony up. It's not more complicated than that. And so I guess that's the challenge I make to us that have to ultimately make the decision. Are we prepared to say, yeah, let's adopt this thing, but staff, you better put the money in the budget so that we actually can do it. So that's parsing my 5 pages down to 2.5.
So it's somewhat of a rhetorical question at this point in time, because we're obviously not in budget season. But to your point that if we're going to accept it and then adopt it, which I believe is the next step once we get past the public process, the final process, we would be adopting it. But that if we adopt it, what does that really mean financially going forward? Okay, I just wanted to be clear. So go ahead, Madam Planner.
Thank you, through you. If I could just add to that, as Jesse mentioned, the next step in the fall is to bring forward a report with some more refinement around the types of programs that are proposed in terms of the programming and the associated costs with that. We were speaking about having an internal meeting with our consultants, including our treasurer and some other staff, looking at what the costs would be allocated to this so that we could look at what the implication would be for the 2024 budget going forward. So we're aware of the need to look at that and what we have to do, and bringing that information forward to council for consideration when we do bring that forward in October. Just as an idea, it would be a scope of the program, but obviously, as Jesse mentioned, council may pick or choose. Here's where one of our priority lies, and this is where we want to put some of the money behind the program at this time. So that's a broader discussion that does have to happen absolutely at this floor.
So the CAO would like to get in.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, it was just, I'll riff on Marnie's statement that this is a 10-year plan. And so that's as part of the budget process, we would pick something. We don't have to do every single one, just like the strategic plan. We have a bunch of different streams and we are picking things to focus on every year. With this, we could, at least we've got the guidance from the public and the input of what's important. And maybe one year we could look at developing a trail on an unopened road allowance. And maybe the next year we could look at putting some money into the Rockport plan or what have you. When I was listening to Jesse talk, I was getting a little overwhelmed by, I could just see the dollar amounts going, and I had the 6 pages going as well. I think your previous life serves you well in your comment that it takes money to attract money, and every single grant application we seem to put out there to seek money from the province or the feds always has that magical section, matching. What is the township putting in to match what you're asking for? And it's usually in terms of percentage, and we try to skate by as much as we can by time in kind. So it's staff time to help on the project. But there is often that, you gotta throw an actual dollar figure in. So you're right. Everything you said is right. But I think when you see it in a 105-page report, it is a bit overwhelming. But I think we have to keep our perspective that it is something we can pick and choose and work on in small steps. And maybe that's where we can say, well, we don't need a 10% increase to do all this discretionary stuff. Maybe we need a 0.5% increase to do this one little project.
Councillor Lackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've listened to some comments and questions and good ones. It is a good report. But I will say it's not the first one I've seen. Not in the least. I've personally have seen these reports and it's all virtually the same stuff. There's been some new additions that I like, which address the heritage aspects. But no offense, but we have had a plan for Rockport and the situation down there, and we had taken steps. We've surveyed the road and the properties of so that we can start to know who owns what and where. When we put the boulevard in at Rockport many years ago, some of that was addressed to the chagrin of some of the neighbors. As it turned out, they love it after having it all this time. That was an agreement that was sort of on the table with Parks, the Parks Commission for parking along the parkway and changing the intersection down there. There is a plan here in this building. Parkettes, along the parkway. We've had conversations in the past at possibly taking those over. We've had a master parks plan within this building since probably Dennis Aerosmith prior to his passing, that's in this building that addresses a plan for the community, which is in this report, which includes pathways from the school, which will allow school kids to come on to township property to use our parks, which would then lead to the fairgrounds. At that time, we had discussions with them where all of these properties could tie together for the betterment of the community, the kids, the schools. We have these plans here. And again, not to any mean disrespect to anyone, but with so much staff turnover, all these pieces of paper and plans sit on the shelf. And I hesitate because what makes us any different? If we look around this table, who's going to be here to make this go when we're not here? And I'll say it, no one. it's all well intentioned, and I hope we can pick something and get it done during our term. There's been a plan for the main street where we actually had agreements in place with the property owners to make arrangements to help out with that intersection. It's here on the shelf somewhere. And I have a question to the planner after saying some of that. I could go on, but I'm not. The official plan amendment to make the entire township a community improvement. Now, I'd like clarification. Does that typically mean, obviously it's going to broaden what we can do by sidestepping some red tape, correct?
The existing official plan only identifies the settlement areas as community improvement areas. So Rockport, Ivy Lee, Sealy's Bay, Lyndhurst, Lansdowne. So if we approve a community improvement plan without amending our official plan, it can only apply to those areas. It can't apply to the rural area of the township. So what we heard is that there's incentives that could be offered with respect to agritourism or other incentives within the rural area. So without including the rural area as a community improvement area, we're leaving that whole area of the township out of the possibility to apply for any funding under the community improvement grant. We're also tying our hands because if there is a corporate project, a capital project or something as it relates to, so say we did choose to go with a road allowance or an improvement of an unopened road allowance as a park, and there was some federal or provincial funding available to assist with that. If we have it identified in the community improvement plan, it puts us ahead of the game in terms of going forward to seek grant funding. So there's a benefit to us to including those lands.
Thank you for the clarification. That's good news.
It is good news. So I just want to add something, Councillor Jameson, before I let you go back to your
I'll go back.
page 4.
Yeah, yeah.
So, when I read this and looked at it, I'll say that it was overwhelming. There's a lot of things that people have come forward. And to your point, Councillor Lackey, there's lots of pieces of paper that have floated around here on shelves and in boxes. We've resourced digital records keeping, which will hopefully, the goal would be is to alleviate that on a shelf mentality. I'm sure it won't be perfection, but it will still be better than trying to dig around in boxes, because even when some of the staff was going through some of the boxes, the things that were found were astonishing, that were just amongst a bunch of stuff, not really filed. So that's not an excuse. That's an explanation, I think, of how things have sort of sifted and moved from one office to the other. What I do get excited about when I read the community improvement plan as it's been presented in draft form today is the fact there are so many projects that can be done. It's a bit overwhelming when you look at the monetary costs. However, having the staff that we have on the financial side, we have a financial plan over 10 years. We have that in place right now. So when that was presented to us, this was not part of that. However, some of these projects can be fairly costly, but if we look at where they plug in year 5 or year 7 or year 4, and then potential for grant applications on what have you, I think that I'm going to be cautiously optimistic that we can actually achieve more than what we might have originally thought. But the downside of all of this, which I'm going to get back to, this is about receiving the report, but I do think this feedback for you and the planning staff is important so that we know where we're going from here. The challenge is the balance that we have to find with all the things that we have to do, roads, buildings, it's health and safety, that sort of thing. And I am not happy to report that coming back from AMO, there is no political will to change MPEC at this point. It is going to be on this table. So as much as I am cautiously optimistic, we're going to have to wear the paint. to get things done. We have to have a balanced budget. We have to do the things we want to do, but I think it's really up to us as council members to engage with the public about the costs associated with the day-to-day operations, the things we have to do and the things that we want to do. And that will be a delicate balance to strike between now and then. We've already been down this road with the last budget, but I think we managed all right. So now that I will get off my soapbox, Councillor Jameson, go ahead, and then Councillor Fody.
I can get back on mine. So I know we're all clear that the SIP is different than just a whole bunch of consulting reports that we may have commissioned over the years. I mean, to the extent there's a Linters revitalization report, and there was active transportation report, and a whole myriad of reports that generally created a lot of expectation for which there was no action, as Councillor Lackey pointed out. And part of that was, at the end of the day, certainly we can look at staff turnover, all the turmoil that went on, but we have to say, at the end of the day, we didn't put the money on the table as a council. The elected people did not say, okay, we are going to put a pedestrian bridge in Lyndhurst. We're going to do all this stuff and we're going to pay for it. So the investment piece is important, but I understand, and I can be correct if I'm wrong, that the SIP is a little bit different because it becomes part of our official plan. And as you pointed out and others pointed out, you create a multi-year implementation process that involves the public, hopefully to the extent that they put their priorities. And, you know, Jesse mentioned Haskins Point as a park. Haskins Point is not an official park in our township. So we already have all these other moving parts that needs to be addressed, like having a parks plan that includes Haskins Point. So we've got some basics to get done. And I certainly support us moving ahead with the SIP. I just think it's a matter of managing the expectations of our residents, but also being prepared to bite the bullet and put money on the table and lead our followers. Don't follow our followers. We're going to have to take some risk, and I think would be worthwhile in the sense that we do need to build the spirit of I think there needs to be a lot of time spent to build the spirit of people in this community, because we have not had enough successful projects over the last decade, and not enough based on the expectations we built. We may have done a lot of good things, but not enough. And in light of the way the province is sort of chasing its tail, the only thing we can do is be positive and constructive locally and manage expectation and build a business plan that puts money on the table. But that's up to council, not staff. This staff will be able to create a plan to do just about anything. We have to say, yeah, here's the money. So I'll shut up now, and I thank you for your time.
Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Listening as everybody else has to everything that's been said here this evening, I think we should have a couple of these a year. These brainstorming does just that. And there isn't anything that any one of you have said here tonight that isn't factual. Councillor Lackey's reference to the past, and it's all shelving. You mentioned we get everything into electronic formatting that can be retrieved at the snap of a keypad. Councillor Maybe's reference that affordable housing isn't affordable. We all know that. But the idea of going to trailer parks, like as you mentioned, there's 2 trailer parks here, then nobody bats an eye at the quality of those trailer parks. Why aren't we pushing a button on that and make affordable housing on a trailer park? I know that the planning department has been speaking with one, if not others, on such subject. But I think the part that I gather, and I'll concise this right now, came from 2 or 3 voices here in the last few minutes. We have our asset management plan. We have coming before us here this community improvement plan and our financial plan. Morph them all together, show the townships who the leaders are and why we're leading. We're elected to do it. We'll make this happen. And unfortunately, we can't rely on the province for even, doing what they're supposed to be mandated to do. It's very unfortunate, but we'll move forward on our own agenda. They told us that we didn't have to have the asset management plan completed because of COVID until July of 21. Our staff at the time were so close to being finished, they encouraged us to let them finish it, which we did. But the real key to all this, Mark had mentioned Councillor Jameson had mentioned quite some time ago, is the staff we have right now. That is the key right there. This is why things have been shelved for years. And there'll always be staff turnover. If somebody offers me a bunch of money to jump ship and go next door, let me know what day you want to see me. But this staff can make this happen. All we have to do is make it happen. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions in regards to the motion that's on the floor, which is to accept the background report as information? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we're carried. I've got the next motion that's on the floor is planning report. We'll go through this one and then possibly take a break. I think that everybody's been at it for a bit now because we started our planning meeting before this. So 5.2 planning report SR-142-23 file number D14-2023-006 Lodge Lane proposed zoning bylaw amendment from RS 35 to RS 60. So the motion comes forward from Deputy Mayor Fody, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that council approve the application for zoning bylaw amendment file number D14-2023-006 for the property municipally known as 913 Lodge Lane and bylaw number 07-079 zoning bylaw for the corporation of the township of Leeds in the Thousand Islands as amended, be further amended as per Exhibit E draft bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 07-079 to report number PL-142-23, and that the council grant 3 readings and final passage to amending the bylaw. Discussion on this motion. I got no hands up, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And is carried. Thank you. So do you want to push through another motion before we take a, we'll go one more and then and maybe we can let the IT guy go after that. So the next motion comes forward from Councillor Jameson, seconded by Councillor Fody, that council grant 3 readings and final passage to the bylaw number 23-041 being a bylaw to repeal and replace bylaw number 19-048 to establish a security and acceptable use of information technology policy for the township of Leeds in the Thousand Islands. Motion is on the floor, up for discussion. Any comments or questions? Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. It was great to see some of the updates in this report, opposed to the first draft that we had a few years ago, I guess, or well, I guess it wasn't really that long ago, but good to see the updates. And thank you for your diligence on that. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did have a question. There's a reference in here to, I'm trying to find it right now. I should have underlined it and I did not. With transportation, is that in reference to the technology that's in a number of our community or township vehicles now? Is that what we're referencing there?
Through your worship, the transportation of data and technology assets, whether it's mounted in a township vehicle or it's me taking my laptop home with me tonight while it's transported in my personal vehicle, just specifically not leaving it in the vehicle overnight. Transportation of a cell phone to Tim Hortons, don't leave it sitting on the table when you leave. That's the intent of that particular section of the policy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Further comment? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it is carried. With that, we will take a short break. It is 7:38, so let's come back at 7:45 and we'll reconvene and hopefully not be here too late. Thank you.